Hello and welcome to the Swim Brief, this Thursday edition. We had no Tuesday edition this week owing to spring break and myself having my 7-year-old daughter attached at the hip for this entire week. But we managed to squeeze in a Thursday. I got the electronic babysitter on, aka the iPad. What did parents do before this? I don't know. Probably like actually talk to their children. Just kidding. I'm a better parent than that, probably. I am joined by fellow tired dad, Joel Rawlings. Joel, how are you?
Great, thanks. Good. Yeah, I know I had a friend who was all about like organic and making his own food and never letting his kid watch TV. And he's like, then I realized I had to shower. So here's the
Right.
iPad, kid. Have a cupcake. Enjoy your day.
And from the supreme Speedo command cave in the Houston, Texas area, Eric Weichen. Eric, how are you?
Without kids, so I'm doing pretty well right now.
Yeah, you get a nice nightly sleep last night. Nobody.
Yeah,
I did.
Nobody.
I've been. Yeah, my tracking chip is a little sore after Tuesday, so hopefully the government takes it easy on me.
Right.
The soreness goes away.
Well, the tracking chip is nothing in comparison to how it's reprogramming your DNA, Eric.
Oh, that's yeah. So maybe they'll give me some hair back.
We're also kidding about that. People, vaccines are great. Everybody here has either an appointment or a shot to get an appointment. What a wonderful thing. Maybe someday, we can see other people. We could do a live version. Probably not, though. I could pretend for 1 second that this would have come together, like with all of us in the same room. Since I live in New Jersey and Eric lives in Texas, and Joel lives in that sort of lawless northwest corner of the United States. I don't really know what we're calling it these days, but all right. So first thing we want to talk about in the news this week, maybe a little bit of a lull from NCAA and championship meets and all that. And there's a pretty significant, I don't know what we want to call it, a stepping away, a temporary retirement. But Nikki Kett, who was an assistant coach at University of Michigan, announced via Instagram that she was going to step away from college coaching. She was going to start some kind of, as far as I can tell, coaching consulting business called Nikki Kett Coaching, which I praised for the originality of her naming structure. So I just wanted to let you guys sort of react to this a little bit since we've been trading stuff back and forth. Eric, what was your initial reaction after reading it?
We're seeing more of a publicity of these things. Obviously, at some point, this happens. I mean, it's one of those things with kids transferring. Is it just the realization that this is a crazy life to live, and it's really not what it's made out to be, or just a matter of kind of what we're seeing to come with more and more coaches, and needs to be a reevaluation of how things go. But I don't foresee that happening anytime soon because the recruiting race never ends. So I'm really just kind of interested to see what happens if Swim Swam is going to pick up more and more of these when it comes to retirements. What was it? Henderson State just had a retirement. I mean, that's pushing 40 years on deck,
the same
but
place, yeah.
Yeah, being on deck a long time. But we're going to see more publicity of retirement step backs, obviously, because it brings clicks. But yeah, I want to know what happens next. These coaches are evaluating their lives and they're realizing this isn't working, and what else is out there.
Yeah, I mean, Joel, is this? I don't know how I want to ask this question. Is this, you think this is part of a greater trend? Is this something that was always going on? We just didn't read about it. What's going on here?
Yeah, I read the article, and obviously it's sad anytime you're losing a good coach. The worst part too is it's another woman coach. There's so few out there. I mean, how many are in a combined program? You know, as a head coach, you know, but it's loss of female leadership roles like that. It's just it's pretty sad. Um, and it's one of those things, like Eric was saying, you kind of think it's like the job is one of those where you can fill 24 hours a day if you want to. It's just recruiting and emails and texts and all the social media stuff that you have to do and things like that. And um, not in this case, but in a lot of cases, for someone to have a family lifestyle in a program, that means at least three other coaches are definitely not getting a family lifestyle. It's
Right.
you know, that's kind of the feudal system of NCAA in a sense, where you've got a lot of assistants and they do a lot of the grunt work. And you know, people say they're kind of paying their dues and work their way up, but you're gonna burn through a lot of good young coaches, and you kind of wonder on the club scene and on the collegiate scene, you know, where all the club coaches, where all the young coaches, and I think a lot of them are having opportunities and they're seeing them and they might be leaving now.
Yeah, I mean, I did a podcast about this earlier. I just think that especially in college swimming, that there's a talent drain
Yeah.
going on right now. It's pretty significant. And I think to a certain extent, like if we look at this particular situation, one of the things you highlight, Joel, is that you have a woman leaving a job, somebody who has been really successful in her coaching career. She's gone a long way in a short amount of time, and probably was going to be a good candidate even in this offseason for head coaching positions. So, and that's more like, sadly, that's probably more something that's happened frequently over the last 20, 30 years. That part of it. But if we look at the overall theme, I just think even since I entered college coaching, which was I coached my first season as a part-time, aka like mostly volunteer coach, $2,000 a season at University of Pennsylvania. That would have been the 2007-2008 season, and I feel like since that time, because I was, you know, incredibly enthusiastic about getting into college coaching, I feel like that since that time, a lot of the jobs have gotten harder, both in terms of what you're expected to do and just the intensity of what you're doing. And the salaries have not kept pace and the staffing has not kept pace. So what you end up with is a situation you described, Joel, that a lot of these places are understaffed and underpaid. And I feel like we're reaching a breaking point. You know, if you're an alumni of a program, not to give you another budgeting headache to worry about or fundraising, but I would ask, you know, I'd get in there and ask the athletic director, how much are we paying the people who coach this program? Because I think you'd be pretty shocked, some people, you know, like to see that a lot of these places have sort of been getting by on the goodwill of some coaches who think, hey, this is a really fun job. Like this is, you know, like it's not the best working hours. It's not the best pay. It's not but I love this job. I love working with the athletes, and this job has a lot of meaning for me. And you know, but you can reach a breaking point on the other end where the job itself and the intensity and the amount of stuff that you're doing makes that exchange just not worth it anymore. And I think we're seeing that more and more.
Yeah, definitely. I
It's
think
such a stressful thing.
it is amazing. It's I used to always joke about how many more athletic directors I had above me and how I was staying at the zero number of assistant coaches below me. You know,
Right.
and I would always ask, like, well, you know what? This is great having another assistant athletic director. Who's going to be helping me with the travel expense reports? Which one of you guys is doing that? They're none of them. You know, like,
No.
then how is this other six-figure job helping me in any way at all, except for giving me one more piece of paper to justify their job?
Right. Yeah, the growth of the administrative class, and you know, part of our ongoing campaign here to alienate athletic directors so that none of us can ever work in college athletics is to always put those ADs in their place about how they're organizing, about their org charts. But I mean, I agree with you. Just like, I just think, and in this case, we're talking about Michigan. Michigan's not, if anybody's understaffed, if Michigan's understaffed, right, then everybody's understaffed, right? They've got all the resources. If you look at the publicly available data on how much coaches are getting paid, for college swim coaches, the coaches at Michigan are getting pretty well paid. So this is one of the best case scenarios that we're looking at. Eric, anything to add?
Just trying to think of the alternatives. She's talking about going into consulting coaches. The other alternative is club life, which is really not for anybody. I can't imagine going from coaching a high level athlete and then, the alternative in the club world is owning your own club or working for a club that is coach owned. It's incredibly difficult at times for somebody to go from working for adults within an admin where there's a structure to going to a parent run board and people who are volunteering who have no experience at all within athletics to be running your life. And then you are working every weekend. It's not just some recruiting weekends and some meet weekends. As a club coach, if you're owning that club, it's 24/7 as well. So it's like the alternatives are really difficult. Maybe you're not paid as well in university, but you're getting university benefits. So where does, there's just so many different situations that arise within there. And I don't see an alternative that's very easy, other than if she gets really good at consulting other coaches, then that will afford her the opportunity to have a more balanced life. But I don't know.
I think you're kind of painting it a little too bleak though, too. I mean, there are some college jobs out there that are very solid and it will be a little more amenable, and there's a lot of club jobs too, where again, if you're coming in as a senior coach that are well paid. I think like the dregs of coaching, like you and I, we don't see those. Nikki Kett she'll probably be all right.
I mean, I was listening, and I do think, and of course this is biased by where I'm working now, but I have seen that there's more flexibility. At least my personal experience is that there's been more flexibility in the club coaching world. And I don't work at, of course,
I don't want to make it so doom and gloom, but there really are the alternatives. There's a lot of give and take and pluses and minuses.
Yeah, it's tough out there. It's tough out there for sure. I do think, and in regards to consulting, I mean, there's a path there as well. I think that one of the things that I realized when I was coaching full time, and then I transitioned to being a consultant there, solely a consultant for about 4 years, is that for sure I missed day-to-day coaching. And I think that if she really likes coaching, like she's going to miss that. She's going to miss she's going to have probably a few months where she's going to be like, thank God I don't have to wake up and go to morning practice. And, she may never recover the desire to go to morning practice. But she's going to miss that day-to-day like contact with athletes and helping them to get better. But what consulting does do for you is, I think, it's a huge opportunity to learn. So, I mean, I got to have contact with so many more coaches and so many more swimming programs than I normally would have had I been sort of in my own environment, just sort of like doing that day-to-day work. So I think that was like really great. It allowed me to expand my horizons, and I met coaches from all parts of the country that I never would have, I think, otherwise. And so I'm really grateful for that. And I think it gives you some time for reflection too. It's so hard to find time, like when you're constantly on to the next, on to the next, on to the next, to sort of think about, what works, what doesn't work. If I were to coach again, how would I do it? How would I set things up? How would I tackle this problem? What would I do in this situation? All that kind of stuff. Like you get more time for that. And I think you can't underrate how much that reflection serves you. So I wanted to use this to transition a little bit, a topic that comes up, like once a year in a blog post on Swim Swam is like, hey, coaches, you got to take better care of yourself. And so I thought, instead of a generalized lecture on that, I posed this question to you guys yesterday, that we would just share, each of us, one thing that we have learned over our careers to do to just take sort of overall better care of ourselves, and sort of keep ourselves in decent mental and physical shape for the long haul. Because I know that, looking back at the beginning of my coaching career, I had very few skills for taking care of myself. Like in the beginning, it was just like, let me just like throw 100% of myself into this and not care about anything else. And because that's what I need to do. And over time, generally, I've had to like figure out, it's like aging as an athlete, right? You got to sort of figure out how to know yourself better, how to take care of various things. So Joel, why don't you go first? What do you got?
I used to joke with my assistant coach that we're going to start running a closed door policy, because everyone's like, oh yeah, we got an open door. It's like, I'm closing it. Because it's like, the practice, you've got that. That's no problem. That's easy. I was teaching classes. That's all these things that are concrete and fit in a box. It's right. the problems, and you have 40 women on a team. You have 25 men on a team, whatever it is, and it's the age of texting and things. They always have. It's like you're sitting there with your phone, like all these you think are brush fires, but what I started doing was not responding so quick to those texts, because again, they have unlimited emotional energy, and I don't. And I started to realize that. I'd go home and be like, I'd tell my wife, like, listen, I can't, today's one of those days I can't listen to one more bad thing. I'll explode. And what I learned though, by doing that, was by not answering or helping or answering the questions right away, was 9 times out of 10, 15 minutes later, they figured the problem out for themselves. And then I started thinking, like, me helping them was probably more for me than for them, in a sense, because what's better for them is that they work through these things. Because again, if you're dealing with a club athlete or an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old, they'd be like me sitting around with my 7-year-old telling them the answers online, because I just want quiet. And that's happening too often now, as it is. Like, the answer 7, just put 7 down. Let's move on with our day. But it's better. Obviously, he works that out. And for a lot of these kids, a problem with the roommate, yeah, we can sit down, we can talk it out. I can give you 18 different options. But the thing is, really, it's better that they figure that out. And then if it gets to a point where it's still a problem, then we'd sit down and talk. And obviously, there's big problems that would come up, and there's little problems. And for a lot of athletes, they wouldn't always be able to differentiate yet. Because you've got some people that have had traumatic lives, and they've had a lot of things going on. All of a sudden, and a parent dies, or something big happens. It's a huge problem. And you've got another swimmer coming in, their goldfish died. But for them, they're emotional. This is the first time anything like that's happened. So for them, it's the same thing as right. Something else like that. And so you have to, again, help them through some situations, but also you have to learn they need to help themselves through. So stepping back and not answering every email and every text immediately, giving them parameters like, what, after this time, I'll be able to answer emails, or after this time, I'll be able to get back to text, but I've got, I'll be at practice or wherever. I can't look at it all the time.
Yeah. One of the things I'm most grateful for in working where I am now is, first off, absolutely nobody outside of the people I work with has my cell phone number. So no parents, no swimmers know how to contact me when I'm not at work, which is a huge change from the last time I was coaching, when I would get texts, in the middle of the night, like, hey, I'm not coming to morning practice. You know what I mean? And I still didn't know how to put the moon up on my iPhone. And so I'd get like a bing at 10:45 when I'm trying to sleep for morning practice. That stuff's crazy. The other thing is, I was told very explicitly, like, hey, you have a work email address, you're in the office. My schedule is that I'm in the office all day, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Don't check your email outside of those 2 days.
Right on.
So like, sometimes people write me on a Friday, they don't get a response until a Tuesday. And I'm so shocked is that people basically learned, like, if I have something that, needs, like, they don't email me with crises, like, you need to solve this for me right now, because they know, like, Chris not going to read this until Tuesday. So we have conversations about long-term stuff back and forth. So I'm really grateful for that. And I think it's done tremendous things for my mental health to not log into my work email when I'm not here at the office and can, like, do something about it. Because you get that feeling like, you have
Yeah.
that immediacy when you read it, like, I got to do something.
Yeah, I worked for a coach who did the same thing, where he's like, I'm not going to give out myself, and the parents went nuts. They're like really upset. Then after about 2 months, one of the parents came up to me, is like, they realized, oh yeah, there really isn't a swimming emergency. If my kid broke their arm, they're not going to be at the meet. They're not at the meet. I'm sorry they broke their arm. That's you taking care of that. What am I going to do? I'm at a
Right.
meet.
Right.
It's like, they're not going to be at practice. Well, when I did the attendance, they weren't at practice. It's okay. I don't need to be pinged all the time, right?
Right. Put it in an email, then I'll have a record.
On Tuesday.
Eric, what you got?
I, am thinking about this, and I have been off deck since October 2019. So I've had a bit of time to kind of reflect on a lot of this stuff. And I mean, first things first is I wasn't very nice to myself, being vulnerable here for a long time. Screwing up the difference between being humble and being modest, as you so educated me, Chris, on, and really just doing myself a complete disservice in my ability to coach, which in turn really screwed up my enjoyment of the profession. Like, it should have been more fun. I should have been more engaged in it. And not to say that I was disconnected and not paying attention to my job. It was just too many moments were spent wondering whether or not I was any good. And anytime there was success, that enjoyment was fleeting, or I was seeking validation outside of my own thoughts, and never really trusting my thoughts and whether or not it was any good at the job. So just having a better understanding and being easier on myself would have made the job a lot more fun. I think everybody around me probably would have enjoyed it a little bit better too. The other one was not that I was super controlling, but just allowing others to take over for me. I was a head coach for a small team. We had a small staff, but it was very rare that I was not at practice. Really, the only time I wasn't at practice is when I was traveling for a meet, end of season meet, whenever I was gone for sectionals or juniors. And it was, this concern that things were going to get screwed up. Somebody wasn't going to show up. And the reality is they're going to make those mistakes. My assistants were young, or that wasn't their primary responsibility. Just let it go. If it does happen where somebody doesn't show up, and just deal with it as it comes about, not worry about it, that it's going to happen, and freak myself out, rather than, being just, I guess, react to it, which is not necessarily what you want to do, but at the same time, it is just allowing things to happen outside of me and not being afraid to take a day. Like, my assistants are going to be able to cover the practice, and maybe I do need to take a Wednesday afternoon off. But to answer the same thing with work stuff, I'm paying a little extra out of pocket, but I have a personal phone and I have a work phone. And my Speedo hours during the week when there aren't meets ends at 5 o'clock. And at 5 o'clock, the work phone goes away. On Friday, it goes away, and I don't pick it up until Monday morning. And I just really now try to separate my life as best I can.
And enjoy the silence
nice.
of the personal phone. So for like 72 hours, no one calls your personal phone. It's just awesome.
Especially, you're completely isolated here by yourself in your little Speedo headquarters in Houston, and but it's just doing a better job of all those things, and just enjoying life a little bit more, and not freaking out about stuff not going your way because you aren't there. So
yeah, I think there's so much to be said for having that, having things compartmentalized in that way. And it took me too long as well to figure that stuff out. Um, and just for people listening to talk about the Eric referenced the difference between being humble and being modest. Just want to explain that comment. This is something that I repeat over and over again. One of my phrases. I think that humility is great, because humility is not exaggerating what you're capable of. You're being honest about what you're capable of, and I think that's to be admired in any person. I'm not a fan of modesty, because modesty, in my opinion, is actually underestimating what you're capable of in order to sort of achieve some of the social benefit or whatever of humility. But I think a lot of people miss the mark. They go for modesty. They underestimate what they're capable of, or how good they are at something, and they do themselves a disservice by doing it. All right, so I got the hammer on this one, and it's my podcast, so nobody's going to cut me off. I'm going to tell a little bit of a story here, and I won't bury the lead. My number one hack for keeping yourself in a good place is therapy. Okay, and let me talk about how I got there, because my sort of sentiment about therapy, and I'm talking about talk therapy with a licensed mental health professional. I talked to a licensed clinical social worker. I found those people are actually pretty great in general at what they do. But my basic sentiment is most people don't necessarily need therapy, right? But also most people would benefit from therapy. So, and I think that the mistake that I made was I never went until I needed it. And it would have been really helpful had I gone well before I needed it. And you talk about stressors in your life. I mean, when I ended up needing it was coaching in Denmark, had a young kid, was very stressed out, 55, 60 hours a week. I was having a lot of conflict with my age group coach. Talk about having stuff in your back pocket to fire somebody. I won't get into like all 9 steps of stuff that we disagreed with that I thought like, I don't want to deal with this guy anymore. But the last thing that I would fully admit I tried to leverage into firing him was he's 29 years old. He had an 18-year-old assistant coach who was still in high school, and he started dating her. And that's not illegal, right? I actually think the age of consent in Denmark is something ridiculous, like 15 years old or 14 years old. I have no idea. But it's nowhere near that. But to me, it is incredibly unethical as somebody that's like coaching, like she went to high school with kids we were coaching. And I thought like, this is totally inappropriate. So I tried to fire him. He got some parents armed with pitchforks, and they said, nah, we'll fire you instead. So I was on a long march to walking the plank. And at the same time, my mom had a brain tumor and she was dying. The amount of time she would be dead, like I think 15 months after it was that I got made to walk the plank. It was incredibly stressful time for me. And that stuff definitely pushed me over the edge to where I went, like, I really, really need some help. I found a wonderful therapist in Denmark. I've had like 4 people because it's hard. You move, and before recently, it was very hard to like even think about doing stuff online. So you had to like try and find somebody in your area, and then find somebody that takes your insurance, and this, that, the other thing. But it's been worth it. It's been worth it to have somebody that is not my friend, is not a relative of mine, but to be able to do some of that sort of self-reflection and just work through stuff that's going on in my life, work through like, hey, I keep doing this. I don't really want to be doing this. Like, can you help me sort of think through why it is I'm doing this or what's going on. I think it's been incredibly helpful. So I highly recommend it. It's done tremendous things for my own mental health. And even as I sort of go through moments where I feel a lot better and I get tempted, like, I'll just stop, I'll just stop. I find myself thinking like, or I could just keep going because this is I don't need it, but it is helping me a lot. And I hope that no matter how busy I get, that it's something that I always make time for. And I think with the advent of stuff online, it's become actually incredibly convenient. Sure, I miss being face to face with somebody, but the convenience of FaceTiming somebody for a half hour, 50 minutes, or whatever time period we end up talking, and not having to drive from my house and drive back and all that other stuff. It's made it an incredibly convenient thing to include in my life. So I think it's been great. All right. Final part of this podcast. We decided we wanted to do something that we're going to give people the content that they want. And what they want is a bunch of, one swim coach. I guess I'm the only current swim coach. Well, Joel coaches masters. Let's not dismiss him. But the full-time swim coach and two kind of sort of ex swim coaches. But we're going to talk through some sets, some practices, some sets, whatever. And you guys have sent me some stuff ahead of time, and I'm going to share the screen, and you guys are going to sort of like give that chalk talk of what's going on in the practice. So let me just like.
So when you edit this part out, you're going to put this part at the beginning as the hook, rather than going through all the other stuff, which people that would normally want to talk about practices would be like, I'm tuning out now. So we're gonna switch this, or we'll just keep going with this. Never mind.
Yeah. Just come on. So I'm gonna share my screen and just and I got Eric's workout pulled up here in my Google Docs. Eric, take it away.
All right. So it's a little bit of background about what you see in front of you. So I've evolved in my style of coaching. I've evolved in what I actually write for practices and through practices, and Chris has kind of gone through the same thing a bit. I was a US RPT coach for about 5 years. Wanted to really see what it was all about, see what kind of things were going on. I had a lot of great buy-in from the kids, just experimenting and doing different things. Slowly kind of evolved from that as I transitioned out of that team and into the team that I was with when I wrote and ran this practice. I also started to evolve when it came to descriptors in terms of what was going on. So I left this set as is because I wanted to show as it was written and how I would actually change it. I started realizing when I put it in words like fast, I was not getting the kind of response that I was hoping for in terms of the engagement within the set. And what I mean by that is that too often the kids were seeing that word, and then some of them were internalizing it, because what they identified as fast and what was happening within that set could be upsetting, and not to necessarily just give them guardrails the whole time and try to remove some of that from it. It's hard to quantify on a given day. Fast is going to be very different. So that's why if I was going to change anything on those number twos, you wouldn't see the word fast. You would see the word stronger or strongest. So on any given day, your effort could be the same. Whether or not the times are the same as at this point is completely arbitrary. So and I say that the first time I ran this set was in an outdoor 6-lane pool that was very shallow. The water was warm, the sun was out right on top of us. So it wasn't an ideal training environment for the kids. So to see fast might have been really disheartening because fast that day was, a 105 on the freestyle interval. And when in reality, fast for that athlete indoors ideal might be 102 or even 59. So it's an IM set. I learned from the head coach at the time, Kit Rollerson, is something that I tried was to try to separate a bit of the fly, give them some clean fly time, and then go into the strokes after it. So it's more of a 4 IM type mentality in terms of efforts. So swimming the fly, increasing the fly effort, and then descending the hundreds, much like you would descend 50s within an IM. So doing 3 rounds of this, just tried to ingrain the idea of increased effort from the strokes, and then just with the number of rounds and the rest as it was, is to have more of an aerobic component to it. So typically, the non-freestyle endurance or training sets are individualized, so working on fly individually or back or breast, but then mixing in some of these sets to where they are just really thinking about the transition from stroke to stroke and then within each stroke. So if I would do anything differently with this set, it would probably be that second one would say stronger, and maybe round 3 it would say strongest on that second 100. Just I really enjoy moving things to that. The kids really loved it. They felt way more in control. The kids understood what a strongest effort was, and if they did it and they went too fast, they learned from it and they applied it going forward. So
can I ask you a question? Because I'm looking at this, I always think this is really when you're sharing practices and stuff, like I always want to know context wise, just the ability level. Cause like I'm looking at this and the swimmers that I coach right now, you guys know that like, the fastest 200 freestyler in the group that I coach goes 156 and just broke 2 minutes for the first time this season. Yeah. So as I'm looking at this is just with the intervals, this would be impossible for the kids that I coach. So like, what's the ability level, sort of on average of the kids that were swimming this set?
These were the kids that were doing this particular set were more mid-distance 4 IM focused and happened to have a solid 2 IM. This was the first time I ran this set. I did it a couple more times. I did it inside. The first time I did this, the 4 IMers that were doing this were approaching or under 410. One of them was already getting closer to that 4 minutes. I mean, the biggest thing is that you can adjust the intervals as such to where you're trying to get enough rest to where the strokes and the turns and the intangibles are sustainable. The guys that happen to be doing this set were able to manage those particular elements, and I was willing to adjust those intervals. And there was a secondary group that were developing 4 IM. It was one of their events. So there was a secondary interval, 5 seconds added to each of those hundreds. And so, yeah.
But you had people in there who could go under a minute on their 400 IM backstroke split, right? Or around a minute. And so like a 105 100 backstroke was not like the most was not their top end practice speed.
Yeah, as you can see, this was a they were learning through this set what they were capable of.
Right.
One of the IMers that, as I said, I stopped coaching in 2019. One of the IMers that did really, really well with this set at the time is now around 350 in the 4 IM. He's developed really well since I've left, and he's going to be swimming in college. But the idea is to try to be able to get enough rest at the wall to where they're able to mentally reset. If that's, some kids can reset on 5 seconds, and you can kind of let them do that. But if they can't really reset from 100 to 100 on this tight of interval, then you need to expand it. I wrote a lot of my sets based on mental energy. I didn't go beyond 30, 35, 40 minutes because I would just lose quality of movement. What's the point of giving a kid a 50-minute IM set if they get through 30 minutes and then it's trash after that? So just trying to get the most I can out of 30 minutes and then trying to expand it from there. And this was kind of right around in that realm. So yeah, these are probably a little bit more on the strong side of an IMer, but by separating out the fly, they can manage those distances. They can be successful in the fly. And those hundreds are such where you're not crushing them because they just did a bunch of fly on the front end and they're cached. So
Yep. Well, I like it. Gosh, I might be ripping this off at some point. Okay, Joel, let's
the text stream. Nice.
Yeah, let me stop sharing and actually pull off your workout so not everybody can see.
I feel bad now. I was on my way somewhere, like, well, here's an idea, and then now it's gonna be displayed for all 2 other listeners. Wow.
I'm trying to figure out a way to display
like
your
set,
workout.
Joel. I like your set, Joel.
Thanks, Eric.
Joel, don't be so modest, okay?
Yeah, modest is bad for you.
That's right. I'm trying to find a way to display your workout without showing people every single text I've sent. Let's see.
Yeah,
all that coach bashing, we should probably keep behind closed doors.
That's right.
I can just describe it while you pull it up if you want. Otherwise, I mean, this is media gold right now. Watching you look at your screen.
I'm sharing. Okay, here it is.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple set. We used to do it, and we called it the pain train. Like, I was watching the Tour de France, so I thought, man, that'd be pretty sweet if we do like a Peloton thing. And so it evolved over time that I was at Whitewater. We called it the pain train. It was like, so it started kind of like a leader to the end concept where, the person leading is going fast, everyone else is trying to draft off them a little bit, and they go to the back. It was like that was kind of weak. Then after a while, what we started doing was we just do like, we'd say we're going to do 12 or 16 100s on an interval that was a little bit above what their threshold would be. And so we'd set like, I put on this as the interval at 105 because that was easy for me to do math. And then I would assign the assistants that had brains to do the intervals for everyone else. So like if we have 4 in the water, the first 3 are swimming, the 4th one is sitting out for the first one. And so the first one leaves on the top, and the second one, third one go on their usual intervals. And then as they finish that first 100, the person that's sitting out becomes the new leader. And so they dive in at the minute. The person that would have been going on 105 goes at his usual interval, but the first person gets to dive. So they get that little bit of a surge, and then everyone else tries to slip into the draft. And then whoever was the last person on that set now hops out. So they get like, 50 seconds rest. And then they dive in on the next minute. And so you keep on going where it's like a new leader of the Peloton kind of a thing. And it's just a basic threshold set. But what I liked about it was the amount of chaos that it would generate where people have to do math. And so they're sitting there, they're doing math in their head.
You have to do math while they're really tired and like breathing like.
Yeah. Because when I started thinking a lot about was I started towards the end of my career, was like swimming is all about kind of transitions. You're going from sitting on a pool deck or cheering something. Now all of a sudden you're up and you're racing and you're in a race and something's going to go wrong. And so this is one of those things where I thought there's a lot of things that were going on beyond just, being a threshold set. So one was, they have accountability where you put someone who's a little bit slower than the group in there, and they know that if they screw up the lead spot or the interval, the whole thing shuts down. And it's you go to the box of shame for that. It's like, you shut down the set. It was going so well. And so they feel that you get little surges where they get a rest. They get to feel good about themselves because they're not really doing 16 on 105. They're doing 3, then a break, 3, then a break, 3, then a break. But I liked it because there's accountability in it. I like it because there's a lot of diving, there's a lot of waves. And so they've got to manage their environment a lot better because the water's not still. It's always moving. It's kind of like being in a relay where you're diving into the chop or you're pushing through chop and all of a sudden you get a mouthful of water, but you still have to keep on this interval because if you shut down, if you stop, if you pull over to the side and cough it out, the whole thing shuts down too. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of neat in that it puts a lot on the kids. It puts them into like some meat situations, even though it's again just like a threshold set. And then for me, technique wise, obviously you're not going to be able to sit there and stop kids and work on technique like I would do a lot. You kind of let the eyes kind of glaze over a little bit and just kind of watch the general movement of the whole group. And you start looking for like, take moments like this to look at systematic things. What are things like the group is not kind of doing really well, or how are they doing off the walls? How are the strokes looking on that, 12th and 13th? Are they breaking down there? So rather than just using meets as assessment tools, taking time for a group practice like this to be an assessment tool for the entire team. Are we doing enough core work? Are we doing enough wall work? Are we doing enough, mental work where they're kind of positively talking themselves through moments where it's like, you didn't get enough air on that. What are you going to do? Are you going in this panic state? Or are you going to go through this other? And for us, we were big on, technique and line management, that when they get tired, knowing that you're not just going to muscle through stuff, that you put your energy into some part of the technique that we talk about, whether it's alignment, whether it's hitting the breakouts, things like that. So just try to take simple sets and try to make it something that's going to be more beneficial.
I love the part of this, Joel, where you talk just about having like organized chaos, because I think that it's underrated in terms of, I know something you and I talk with our rural Tasmanian uncle about,
Yeah.
is the idea that I think a lot of swim practices are almost too organized and too structured in the way that the kids are swimming. So, and that it doesn't prepare them very well for racing situations, which are far more dynamic and chaotic, and other people are doing things and you have to respond to what it is they're doing. I think this is a set where you're always having to respond to what other people in your lane or even the lane next to you are doing. And I love that part of it. And just watching people have to sort of adapt in real time, that has a lot of appeal to me, coaching wise. This also sounds like every hard aerobic set. If you take out the dive part, this is like every hard aerobic set I did in college with my 3 other teammates, where we would alternate who would lead the lane, and then the 3 other guys would push off within 5 seconds of the first person. So we would just run a train. So one person would have to swim pretty hard on the aerobic set like every 4 days. and every other guy would just drag off for the entire thing. And luckily a D3 program, so 1 to 2 coaches for 50 people. He didn't have a lot of time to sort out our blatant dragging off of each other. He just had to live with it. But my swimmers don't do that. Don't you dare do that. Do as I say, not as I did. Eric, you got anything on this one?
No, I think honestly, as a swimmer, I think it would have been a lot of fun. I remember doing similar things to this within sets, just rotating the lead, especially when, not being in a super strong program, but being one of the strongest swimmers, I got tired of dragging everybody around. So then you kind of give that teammate the opportunity to be in that position and watch them respond and give them that. And it really does help the people around you. It scares the crap out of the new guy in the lane, especially if they've just moved up a group. All of a sudden they're in the lead of everybody. So, but I think I would have loved being in that set, especially diving. It's such a surge when you're able to do that in the midst of the set. So.
All right, well then I guess it's my turn. And I'm pulling it up here in the background. Most compelling thing on the internet. All right. So this actually, like literally we did this last night and I texted this to you guys. So one of the things we've been trying to do is, as I've said on the podcast, like I've been pushing a lot of volume with kids, and I've been trying to transition them to doing more race-based training, because it's not like I, had a complete religious conversion and just thought like, well, there's no point to ever training race pace. And so, this is a set that tries to get them up to Racebait. It has some stuff that's really, really challenging in it. And you guys got sent the previous week's version, which was, in my mind, well, in anyone's mind, probably a lot harder. So I actually had to pare some of this stuff back. So we got to play basic warm up to get them ready to do something. And then the main set down here, you've got these 150s. And these, like, for the fastest kids in the group that I coach, these 150s are not hard at all. But the low end of the group, it is actually like their normal aerobic interval. It's a little bit slower. They'd be probably more like between 125 and like 127. It's like a 130 base, but it's pretty much right there. And then they get into these 50s and 25s at 100 pace, and these are not following the USRPT orthodoxy. The 50 specifically, for a lot of them, probably a little too much rest on them. So they're more like a traditional VO2 max, 1-to-1 work to rest ratio, probably a little bit, for most of them, a little bit more rest than work. The previous version the week before had these 250s on 1 minute, 100 pace. Those are extremely challenging. And as I said, the biggest challenge I'm having with this set is getting the kids in the water up to 100 pace on those 50s. What I observed more than anything was there's a kind of hesitancy, like even when kids see the word pace, that they immediately go into a mode of swimming that is nowhere analogous to way that they might swim 100. Like, I'm watching people with like sort of long strokes, and they're really sort of like techniquing their way through it. Whereas if they were to race 100, they'd get in there and start thrashing a little bit more. So I had to shake some of them up. After the first round of this, I said to all the swimmers in the water, I said, like, look, here's what I want. Here's what I want to see from you. I want to see you go for it on the first 50. I want to see you like look like you're racing 100. And if you fail on every single 50 and 25 after that, it'll be more valuable than watching you, give me like 200 pace on the first 50 and then another 200 pace and then, crush all the 25s. Like, I want you to break out of that and actually look like you're swimming 100. And a few people did that. So I was pretty happy. The 25s, obviously, it's much easier to do a 25 at 100 pace than a 50. A quarter of your 100 time is just, especially with a hand touch, significantly easier. And then I like to put some colorful language in my set description. This is actually like the kids that I coach, they get this printed out at the end of their lane. So they did not only get told insane speed last 12 and a half, but they see it written on the page. And I will say, we ran out of time because I made them start the set over, because the first rendition where they did a 150 and then 250s, the 250s were so slow. I was like, there's nowhere near. Like, I was watching people who go, 56 and 100 free swim a 33 for 50. And I just said, like, that's not even close to what we're trying to do. It's nowhere analogous to any kind of race pace. It's not even a 200 pace. So we started over. So then we ran out of time for the practice. So I had this funny interaction where I went, okay, on the third round of this, I said, I want you to do the 625s and then go straight into the swim down at the end. And somebody raises their hand that goes, so Coach Chris, no insane speed on this round? And I go, yes, no insane speed on this final round of the set. And because we just don't have time for it, because we had to start the set over. Just practice in all, we have an hour and 15 minutes. So we actually, it's our Wednesday night, and we got to get in, warm up, swim the set, and swim down and get out of there. And things run really, really tightly. That's just one of the circumstances I deal with. Usually I have 90 minutes for practice. I have one that's 2 hours, and then this one is an hour and 15 minutes on Wednesday night, just kind of a quirk of the scheduling. So that's my set.
I think
Any
one
questions, comments?
is like, is kind of like when you redo the 250s, then it kind of comes down to accountability, where it's so hard on when it's always the coach being accountable for the quality. Whereas now we got to stop, we got to do this again, where we're also just becoming, so it's going to become a punishment now that we do the set again. And it's like, now you've crushed my will to live. You've crushed what I wanted to do with this set. And you waste your time. And that's the thing, is we really want as coaches more than anything, is that they're accountable obviously to themselves, but it's kind of the idea of accountable to their teammates, where they're giving their best effort, because their teammates need them to give the best effort, because they need to go their 100 pace. They need someone else there with them. And I used to always like the idea of, we're coaching to get the best, where the kids start to believe in themselves more. But I think the biggest thing that I started to change into the idea was that they're getting to believe in something bigger than themselves, where they're starting to believe, like, again, it was a school that no one's ever heard of, and our school color is purple. And so you got to be like, kind of proud that you're wearing purple in the middle of winter time with a stupid hat on, going to a stupid pool in another school, no one else. So getting them to like believe in something bigger in that environment was kind of a cool thing in a sense for me, where the idea that them being at practice, it wasn't just for them. They have to be practice for their teammates, because their teammates need someone that's going to go that 50, like you said, at their 100 pace, and to get that energy going. If it's just two kids showed up that night and you're having to, whip the mules to get them to go down the hill, he's like, this isn't about swimming. This isn't about going faster. This is just this is just a workout. This isn't like training for something bigger. Yeah.
I mean, what I will say is you hit on something there, Joel, that actually has been a theme of the season. So the name of the group that I coach it's called High School Squad. And, I was asked on another podcast, like, hey, what is that? What is the High School Squad? And my head coach listened to it and he said, you didn't really answer the question. So I'm going to take another stab at it. High School Squad on our team is kids who swim in high school, who, for them, practicing, I think we practice 9 hours and 15 minutes a week. That for practicing that amount of time is the best option for them, right? So we have some kids that if they were to train 12 hours a week, it wouldn't be productive for developing their swimming. Or if they were to do 15 hours, like most of the kids, I think on the national squad are doing with doubles and all that stuff, like it wouldn't be the best option for them. We have kids on the team that want to do another sport in high school, and we make that possible for them. We have kids that, are heavily invested in drama or arts or music in their school, and they want to be able to do that and do competitive swimming year round. This is the group for them. But I say that's the definition of the group. What I see also is that there's a parallel definition that we've been working through the entire year, which is like, which is not coming from me, but I see it coming from other people, where they go, well, it's a throwaway group for kids who aren't fast enough to be in the national squad. And I just don't I think that's no way to run any kind of group on a swim team. I don't think it's productive for any swim team to have a group like that. Nobody's happy or excited to show up to swim in a group like that. And so as critical as I am, if I showed you some of the practices that we did at the beginning of the year, these kids have made insane progress in terms of what they're willing to do at practice. I would put up, and I think that our national squad works insanely hard. It's probably how do you measure these things relative? It's probably the hardest working team I've ever been a part of. The practices that these kids do relative to their ability level are just as hard. And so I'm actually really proud that it's changed from maybe something where it's viewed as kind of an afterthought within a team. And now we're at the stage where I can criticize them that they're not going quite fast enough on a 100 pace, but it's only because they've achieved so many things before that we're even able to address that within the context of a practice as an issue. So any final comments? I know we're not going to do our final goodbyes because we're almost over an hour here, guys.
Do I get to ask questions about your
Yes,
stuff?
you get to ask a question, Eric. I'm sorry. You get to ask a question. Please go.
I was a little worried there. Just one a logistical question, because I know some coaches are indifferent or they expect a specific thing. On the second 50 on 110, do you allow the kids to start up on the 150 right away, or do you make them wait for the end of the interval before they start the 150? I called it banking rest, so
I didn't specify, and I would say that in the vacuum of me specifying, everybody waited. So everybody waited because one of the biggest challenges we've had over the course of the season was just learning how to use a clock and like learning when you're going. I've been hammering that since September, and we've made a ton of progress. I still have some kids that, I can tell they're not looking at the clock for when they're going to start the next interval. We're starting at opposite ends, right? Because of COVID, we're not having too many people on one side of the wall. So I have probably still 25-30% that look across the pool for somebody else. Like, when are they going? And that's going to be when I'm going to leave. It's the new version of the look sideways to see when you're supposed to go. Now they're looking across the pool to see when they're going to go. But the kids know that I'm going to be on them because I just do spot checks. I just walk around and I just go, when are you starting the next one? When's, or how fast did you go on that one? And so I think that a lot of them probably are thinking like, I better start right away. As far as like what I might actually do, I don't.
Because it changes, it changes the scope of the set. You probably get sloppier swimming on the 150 if you allow them to go right after that 50. So, it's just a matter of the give and take. I'm just curious as to
I probably wouldn't let them do it. And what I am trying to get them to do is, like I say, that's an easy interval for the highest end kids, but those kids, I'm trying to get them to go slower on the 150s. Like they don't realize, one of the things I've realized with kids at this level is they don't realize, like they'll go 150 on that first 150 because it doesn't feel very hard, right? But it does actually impact how fast they can go on the subsequent 50. Like I think it lowers performance, and I'm trying to get them to go like now, go 205, go 210, and just have a few seconds and then push off and go in the 50. But that's a hard thing to learn, and it's hard to sort of
you have to reorganize neurologically a lot more than just physiologically. I used to use like the 150 like that as a bait, like kind of with the idea of the rant I was going to go on that day. So start the practice with the rant I'm about to explode on, and put the 150. So they would go early, something like that. And if the quality of movement was down, just light everybody up, light the world on fire, because everyone's like, on the 50, all the rah, you hit your time and things like that. And then they just push off on their side and just kind of loaf through the 2-3 strokes. Like, and that's when I would go off, because it was like, when the crowd is on, you guys are going crazy fast. You're doing what you're supposed to do. When all of a sudden it's off, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. You're pushing off. This is the time where you've got plenty of time to do things correctly, and you're not. Mm-hmm. You're willfully not doing it correctly. And that would be the time where I think that they can learn the most, as far as like, swimming at a slower tempo is hard to do. Physiologically, it's recovery, it's easy, but mentally and neurologically, I think it's really hard. And that's where you kind of start to hit on the things that aren't really the things that look like they should be hit on. So like everyone's all for the 250s, but the 150, everyone's like, all right, well, I already did the work, so I'm just going to kind of do 2 strokes backstroke, roll over, absorb the accolades. Like, and that's when all of a sudden hell would come down upon everybody. Like, oh no, what? I used to get rewarded for this. Not anymore, baby.
Yeah.
And then,
all right, guys.
The only other thing I had was the what would you think of flipping the 25s and the 50s? Change it. how do you think that might change the scope of the set, and just looking at setting up the 50s with 25s? So maybe you're loading them mentally with what you feel in the 25s and that tempo. Let's see that on the 50s. Can you match that?
Yeah, I can see what you're thinking there. I mean, like, I might try it because I can see the benefit of like getting them in a rhythm of doing it a little bit before they have to get to the 50s. I would say probably the argument for keeping the 50s where they are is because it's the hardest part of the set. So, you know, there's a chance that they still don't get to the level they get to because simply they're like a little bit more fatigued when they get to the 50s. I don't know. We'll probably try it we got to meet here in 2 weeks. So we'll probably try a scaled back version of it next week because they'll be resting a little bit for the meet. Maybe less rounds, but maybe also flipping. Maybe the 50s will go away altogether next week. I haven't really decided what I'm going to do. All right. For anybody listening to the audio version of this, if you go to my website, we'll put up the workouts so that you can see these and know what the heck we're talking about. I guess I should have said that before we started talking through the workouts, but hey, you know, I'll put it in the description. I'll put it in the description. Thank you guys for joining me. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for all your comments. Thanks for being you. And I'll talk to you again next week.
See ya.
See ya.